happy to have this opportunity to chat with you. I am in awe of what you do, who you are, where you come from. And I don't know a lot about where you come from, even though I know who your father is. There's not a lot out there. So you're a kid. Your father's already massively famous when you're a kid. How are you? Where do you grow up? You grow up in LA. Are you like a spoiled rotten kid? Are you going to special schools? What is your childhood like?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Appreciate
I
you
haven't
having.
stopped talking yet, you
That's okay.
noticed.
That's okay. I just want to thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And the answer to that question is all of the above, really, and none of the above, I guess. It just depends on which period of time you kind of asking about. But when I was born in Santa Monica. And
Nice.
lived in Encino with my parents and my siblings until I was 9 years old, and then we moved to England and
Wow,
lived,
exotic.
lived in England for several years while my dad was working on a couple of different things, and then back to LA, and I've been an LA guy for the most part ever since then. So
What was that like being uprooted to another country? Was that fun?
I have very fond memories of it. There were some difficulties, but I mean, this is London in the late 60s and early
Wow, the
70s.
Beatles.
Yeah, so and also it was still it was still very it's nowhere near as developed really as it is right now. It was still mostly the old buildings and
Mm.
but it was great. I mean, it was a different time. My mother put us in a school in North London a area called Swiss Cottage, I guess, or Swiss Cottage was the name of the subway station that you would get off. We lived in the southwest part of London. And so she put us in this school up there and she showed us how to get there every day. She said, you're going to walk over here from the house over to the Earl's Court tube station. You're going to go down, you're going to get on the train. You're going to take the train to Piccadilly Circus. You're going to get off the train, and you're going to pick up another line, so you're going to go down a little bit further, and you're going to take this Bakerloo line all the way to Swiss Cottage. You get out, you go up to the street, you're going to walk 10 minutes. Oh, there's my cat. And then
Poor baby.
you're going to walk about 10 minutes to where the school is. And then she was like, okay, you guys know how to get to school every day. So that's what we did when I
They
was
were such different time. I mean, I took a train in about such different times. That's amazing.
very much.
And was that scary?
It was scary at first, and I think that after a little while, we saw a couple of sort of dark characters down in the on the subway platform a couple of times, my brother and sister and I decided that I wanted to find a bus that could take me from school back to the house. In the morning, I would go on the tube, but sometimes I would just not feel it. And I was able to find this bus. That was the 31 bus, and it went from Swiss Cottage subway station all the way to the Kensington subway
I
station.
bet that took a long time.
It took a
It,
long
it took a
time. Yeah,
long
it was
time.
about an hour and a half home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And so, okay, so I know your mother was also a singer and an actress. So I assume there was music in the house always. Your father, oh my God, there must have always been music in the house. Were your parents accepting of pop music? Was there pop music in the house, or was it always classical? What was going on in your house?
Well, it wasn't always classical. I mean, they both started out as jazz musicians. They
Ah,
went to high school together. And
what?
and my father was in a jazz band, which
Where did they go to high school?
North Hollywood High.
Wow.
So my dad was born in New York, but moved out here with his family when he was about 15 or 16 and went to North Hollywood High. And my mother was in North Hollywood High, and so he joined the jazz band of North Hollywood High School, and as opposed to like I assumed as opposed to the band marching band or something.
Right.
So there was a jazz band, and he was in that, and my mother was a singer. She was a part of that group as a singer, and so they go all the way back to high school.
That's
together.
crazy. But
Um,
did they marry right out of high school?
no, she came out of high school and became an actor. You know,
Yes.
she and in those days you had to sing, you had to dance, you had to act, you had to do it all. So she did all of those lessons and all that preparation. And got some great parts. She was in the movie Carousel and in this movie called The Affairs of Dobie Gillis, where
She was in Cinderella on TV.
she was in
She played
Cinderella.
with the mean stepsister. I remember your
She
mother.
did. She played one of the stepsisters. So yeah, so she had a lot of parts. My grandparents, her parents were radio actors from the 30s,
Ah.
40s, 50s. And both of them moved into
What brought them, where were they from? What brought them to Los Angeles?
I think probably just the entertainment business brought them to LA. My grandfather, her father was from Idaho, I think.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure where my grandmother was from. She may have actually been from Los Angeles, but her family was from somewhere in the Midwest.
So like real Americans, you're like
Oh yeah, yeah.
multi-generational American.
Yes, exactly. And then
Hmm.
and Irish, very, very Irish, you know, with a sprinkling of English and maybe some
Mm.
Dutch or something. But you know, I looked up my DNA and I'm like 85% Irish. So yeah, our family has been here, you know, from the old country back probably in the 1700s at some point.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And true Angelinos you are. So,
True.
okay, so jazz music was in your house.
So jazz
And
music was in the, yes. And
and
also
are you encouraged to participate?
we were encouraged to participate. It was also completely fine for us to enjoy the pop music of that time, you know. Um, we loved the Beatles, you know, when they were out and we were little kids in the valley here. And we were
What did
allowed.
your parents think of the Beatles?
Well, my dad, you know, thought it was kind of noisy, but you know, he appreciated what it was and could appreciate that you know, it's for the kids. It's, you know, it's that kind of attitude.
Hmm.
But he has a large, enormous appreciation of music of all kinds.
Sure.
You know, he would never really thumb his nose at anything, and he certainly would never sort of discourage us and say, you can't listen to that in the house, and you know, that kind of thing. We just had to be quiet when he was working. You know,
Hmm.
that was a main rule. But my mother, because of her parents, and because they went back in LA back to the 40s, 30s, and 40s, they were character actors in radio, and
Wow.
they both worked a lot. And so they knew so many people in Los Angeles, actors, producers, directors, you know, all just everybody in that field, in
Hmm.
film as well as radio and in television. So my mother was very instrumental in getting my father a lot of work.
Wow.
Yeah, so and she was of the very glamorous type and would host these you know elaborate cocktail
Soirees.
parties. Yeah.
So when your father started out, so he was in this jazz band in high school, and then how did he transition to be a professional musician
Well,
initially?
he was studying to be a concert pianist, you know, a
Hmm.
classical pianist, and he went to Juilliard and studied with one of the very famous teacher, Madame Levine was her name. I forget her Rose Levine, I think was her first name. I can't remember. But and he had a couple of students that were his friends who were all sort of doing the same thing, and it was very competitive, I think. And it turned out that he as incredible as he is as a player, he didn't quite have whatever that thing is to go into being a classical piano player. So he and he also was an incredible reader, sight reader and player. So he and learned how to arrange. And so he started getting all kinds of different types of jobs. He played piano in the orchestras for the film industry in his early days in Los Angeles. He was in the Air Force for 3 years. And while he was in the Air Force, they had him uh, station, I think in Newfoundland, and he led the band and wrote arrangements for all the different
Wow.
bands and ceremonies and all of that kind of stuff. And I think the very first film he ever put music to was an Air Force film, like some
Huh.
kind of recruitment film. But what happened was he was in LA and working as a piano player for other composers, Alfred Newman and a lot of these composers of that time period. And occasionally someone would say, can you do an orchestration for this thing? I think he worked for Universal Studios. They had a kind of a studio system thing there where they would have several composers working in different rooms, and one guy would conduct another guy's score, and another guy would do orchestrations for this guy's score, and so on and so forth. So we started doing those kinds of orchestrations and getting more and more of that work, and so that's how he sort of transitioned over to composing for film.
So composing for when he was at Juilliard, was that something that he studied to do?
He did not.
He
He studied primarily to piano.
concert p
Yes,
con
he studied.
so he kind of backed his way into
It just one thing led to another, to another, to another. It was one of those kinds of things. It's not like he went to school and studied composition in order to be a composer. And he fell in with the producers and directors and actors and all those people in Hollywood. So the natural progression was for film and for television. He started out doing television. And he was very good at what he did. He could read
no kidding. Yeah.
he could read anything. He could pretty much play anything. So they would hire him, to play the difficult stuff. And then the composers of the time realized that he was capable of doing great arrangements and great orchestration. And then from that he moved into maybe writing a score for somebody else's show, and then eventually got something of his own, and did a bunch of television leading up to film, and worked with probably some of the same producers in his early films, and then it just kind of kept steadily going up.
Were you aware, you three aware when you were kids how successful your father was, how important your father was?
We were very much aware that he was like one of the best. We
Mhm.
definitely had that sense. Also my mother drilled it into us. You know what I mean? It's very important what he's doing. So don't you guys got to behave and everything. And we're having people over, so please, stay upstairs or whatever it was that they told us. And of course, we hung out on the rails of the staircase watching these cocktail parties. I think the first few drinks I had was when I was about 8 years old, like, cleaning up after one of the parties.
Sure. Oh, we're going to talk about that. And were you doing were you going to like glamorous galas and opening nights and doing all of that kind of thing?
They were.
They were.
They certainly were.
Hmm.
We were left at home with somebody watching us,
Hmm.
usually. But we knew that he was great, and we also were aware that, I mean, he didn't have any difficult times during that period of time. His career started and then just kept
Right.
ascending like this, and it never really
There were
dipped.
no lean years for
Not
John
really.
Williams.
No,
No.
not really.
So at what point, so when do you start? Are you musical right from the start? Are you singing out of the womb? When does this start happening for you?
So I started singing really early on because my mother was a singer. So she was one of these characters that would just make up a song if you just said a phrase to her. Like, I want to go outside. And she'd go, I want to go outside. Da, 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 da. You know what I mean? She would just, whatever you would say, she would, turn it into kind of a tune. She would
Mm.
lilt around the house, singing stuff that she made up. So there was always that going on. And then my parents' relationship was started out with her singing for him in his band. And so when he was writing stuff, she was always there, singing melodies or parts of what he was doing, to help him flesh it out.
Wow.
So there was a lot of that stuff going on, and he would write a lot of songs, and she would sing them, and they would get them better and improve upon them. So there was always music. I don't remember a time when there wasn't. I really don't remember a time when I wasn't singing something. They would also parade the three of us out to do bits for their friends. You know what I mean? When they would have parties over and everybody would get a little tipsy, and they're like, "This, you're gonna laugh at this. Watch this." And I would come down and sing some Fred.
And did you have the voice? Like, did you have like the belting, booming voice? Like,
No, not at
no,
all. No,
no.
no, no. I learned that much later, but I could hear pitch. I could hear
Mm.
pitch, and all obviously we were all three of us offered music lessons with various instruments.
Okay, so did you do that? What did you
Well, I
do?
I did the least, believe it or not. I'm the one that's still working in the music business, and I did actually the least of that stuff. My sister, there's a very funny story. My father was kidding when he said this, but my daughter Hannah, who's now an adult and a mother, when she was about 6 or something, she had taken a few piano lessons, and we went over to visit my father, and she sat at his piano to show him sort of some scales. And he looked at her hands and said, "Look, it's perfect. Her hand position is exactly where it's supposed to be. Everything is exactly right." And he looked at me and he says, "I guess it's true." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Talent skips a generation."
Ow!
And I said, "Dad, I'm standing right here." And he goes, "No, no, no, you're right. Your sister's pretty good."
Oh,
So he was kid. That's his sense of humor with me.
yeah.
He's incredibly proud of all of us and what we do. But my sister, who is a psychologist,
I love your sister.
she's fantastic, and she studied the violin, she studied the flute, she studied some piano. She could sing her butt off. She was probably, of the three of us, maybe almost the most accomplished. My brother studied with my grandfather and also with Joe Porcaro, who was, the Porcaro brothers' dad,
Mhm.
and was a drummer. My dad's
A
dad
very
was
accomplished one.
my dad's dad was a drummer. His dad was a drummer. Both my father's brothers are drummers and percussionists.
Did you start out on an instrument? Like, did you start out as a pianist? Was that like your thing at the beginning?
No, I think maybe I started with a little bit of piano,
Mhm.
but I fought the lessons. I fought that. And then I tried the trumpet for a few minutes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I tried the trumpet, and then I just hurt my mouth, so I didn't want to do that either. Um, so I mean, I never really worked all that hard at learning an instrument until I became a teenager, and then I found interest in just writing my own ideas on the piano and develop.
Okay. So when did that start? When did you write your first little ditty there, do you think?
Probably 13 or 14, 12,
Mm.
13, somewhere in
Was it
there.
a song? Was it a music?
Yeah,
What
I had
was it?
songs, little, silly songs. And
Hmm.
my sister would write little things too. We all were kind of at it. I was the youngest, so I definitely followed what my siblings did.
And
So
were you in school plays? Were you in a band? What was your first band?
my first band would have probably been a band with my brother and sister.
Nice.
And we called ourselves the Misfits.
Hmm.
And I think now there's actually a band called the Misfits, but we were the Misfits back in '65. So and my brother played drums, and I sang and played the tambourine, and my sister played the guitar. My brother and sister both play the guitar very well.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's how it was. I think the singing thing interested me a little bit more. Also, what my mother and grandparents did interested me a lot more. I loved radio voices and radio personalities and acting and stage performance and
And
those.
did you do that in school?
Yeah, not till a little bit later on, maybe, 14, 15, somewhere in there. The first professional gig I had was at 15. I was at a boarding school in Northern California, and one of my teachers and counselor at the school had a band, and they were making an album, and she asked me to come into town with her into Berkeley and sing some backgrounds on a particular song. And I could see them going, wow, he knows how to double himself, which I had no idea what I was doing. But they said, we just want you to sing over yourself again, double track it. And I went, okay, and I did it, and it was really close. And so I felt like, wow, I can do this. That was one of the very first things that I did. And
And
then,
what was your ambition, Joseph? What at that time, what were you thinking? What was the dream? What was the big dream for you at that time?
well, I suppose I wanted to be a rock star.
Okay.
I wanted to be a rock star. I liked the idea of maybe being an actor, but I didn't go down that route. Our teenage years were very difficult because we lost our mother when she was very
I'm
young.
so sorry.
And so maybe had that not happened, I would have maybe studied this or that a little bit more. But I went down the delinquent route. You know what I mean? And
Before we get to the delay, did you take voice lessons? Did you study that?
I didn't study voice until I was an adult. I just kind of
Interesting.
did it, and through our teenage years, I was always a part of some band, and that played dances and assemblies and things like that at the various
And you were doing covers, I assume.
covers. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
The band, my brother and sister had a band with a couple of guys in our school, and she was the singer, and they did like a lot of Linda Ronstadt tunes and and things like that, some Eagles and things like that. And I forget why, but she didn't want to do it anymore, and so I took over for her, and had the same range as she did. So I
So
was
you were doing Linda Ronstadt?
exactly just doing all of those songs. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Okay, and so do you remember what your first real acting what was did you have like a good meaty role there and
No, I never. Well, I was in school plays. That kind
mhm, yeah.
no, nothing really of note. I forget
Hmm.
exactly what they were. Simple things. I ne and when I had an opportunity to develop it a little bit in junior high and high school, I kind of went off the rails and sort of didn't really pursue that route. Eventually, acting wise, eventually I got some voiceover stuff, but
Hmm.
most of it was singing. I would be hired to do singing voices and things like that. I missed the acting train completely.
Missed the acting train. You ended up on a pretty good train. You ended up on a
Yeah, I'm
pretty good
happy with
train.
this train.
So now you talked about going off the rails and being a delinquent. So what did that look like and how did that start? How did that start for you?
Well, I think it started when I was about 12, 12-ish, somewhere around there. I started hanging out with some guys in our neighborhood who were a little bit older than me, and they got up to no good. And so I sort of did my best to keep up with them, and they would dare me to do, stuff and that kind of thing. We would ride our bicycles up on the UCLA campus and kind of tear up the, you know, areas of the campus that were lawn or bushes or whatever. We would make these little bike routes. Then my mother died when I was 13 years old,
I'm
very,
so
very
sorry.
suddenly. And my father was in the thick of things. It was the very beginning of his relationship with Spielberg.
Oh,
And he had done a movie called Sugarland Express.
oh,
And
I love that movie.
yeah, then she passed away. And the very next thing he did with Spielberg was Jaws. So that right then is when everything really started to take off for him in a big, big way. Not
So
just
he was not around too much, I'm guessing, because he was probably working his
he
butt
was not
off.
around too much. I remember him specifically telling us that like you guys got to grow up because I got to work and you guys need to go to school, and this is, we have to get through this.
Mhm.
And it didn't take me very long to find drugs and alcohol as a means of being able to cope,
Mhm.
at a very young age. And I was one of these kids that I would try anything. So I would hang,
What
I
was your
hung,
drug? What was your drug of choice? I was a big pothead, but
well, I probably would have to say pot, just because was always ever present and lasted probably
yes.
the longest. But
Hmm.
I was a hallucinogen guy.
Oh, I like that too.
Yeah, I was a hallucinogen guy, and I drank like a fish.
Hmm.
I would drink to blackout state, and
Now, was your father aware of what you were doing?
he was aware. Yeah, because I couldn't remain in any particular school. I kept getting booted out of schools.
And so how did that go over with him?
Not well.
No, well.
Not well. He had his parents a lot of times staying at the house, to deal with some of that. But he dealt with a lot of it. Surprisingly, a lot of it, considering that his schedule was so intense.
Mm,
Doing the actual composing for these scores is a
mm,
very, very labor intensive gig.
mm,
You need quiet and solitude to get it right, and then to record these scores, whether in Los Angeles, or he would go to England to do them, and he was very, very busy, but he was also at the same time very present for me. I think that
wow.
all three of us kids had our issues, but mine were maybe a little bit more pronounced. I had troubles with the law a lot.
Oh.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I was the loss of my mother angered me more than anything.
Mm, hmm.
I think my sister was devastated in her way. My brother uh sort of froze up a little bit after that experience, and my reaction was one of rage.
Mm.
And so and I think maybe personality wise I'm a little bit more boisterous, and so I would do crazy things, and people would dare me to do crazy things, and
Oh,
I
can
would
you
do.
give us an example of a crazy thing that you were dared to do and did?
Well, one good one, I suppose, is a friend of mine who lived down the street. His name was Mortimer Klein,
Good
and
name.
Mort had some friends, and he was a couple years older than me, and he had some friends that were several years older than him, and so he asked me to go with him to some party.
Hmm.
And it was in this house that was a brick. I remember the house was all brick, and it was a two-story house, but it was on like 6 foot footings. So if you were standing in the driveway, it looked like it was about 4 stories high.
Yeah.
And so we were up in this room partying, and I was asked to go, go get some beer, go get the beer. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll go get the beer. And I ran down to the car that we had driven there in, and I guess there was another six pack in there. And I grabbed the six pack of bottles and walked up towards the house and saw like this, tall, seemingly 4 story house. And there was a palm tree that grew out of a 6 foot footing that went up alongside the wall of the house that terminated at the window where everybody was up there partying. So I thought I'm going to show them, and I stuck the bottles of beer in my teeth and shimmied up the tree with my feet on the wall, and then tapped on the window, and they were like, well, "You're out of your mind," and I give them the beer, and then I fell out of the tree and really severely broke my left foot.
Oh, shit.
So I broke a lot of bones.
Oh.
Another very typical thing is my brother was into dirt bike riding,
Hmm.
and he would build these elaborate jumps and pits and fill them with water and everything. And he would say, "Yeah, I just built this jump. It would look like this." And he said, "Do it. It's great." And I would ride around in a circle and go to the jump, and it was so high, I fell and broke my arm one time. And another time
Gosh.
he asked me to get in one of these pits so that he could jump over me, and he tore my scalp up with one of the tires of the of the bike, and just stuff like that. Or these friends down the street. I don't know if you remember the Addams Family
Of course
TV
I
show.
do.
So Gomez was
Butch Patrick's done this show.
right.
Eddie.
Well, Butch Patrick was the Munsters.
Oh, the Monsters, right. We're
Yeah,
talking the Addams Family. Oh,
yeah.
what?
Adam's Family was Gomez and
Gomez and
Morticia.
Morticia.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
Gomez
okay.
was played by an actor named John Aston.
Remember him well.
So
Fabulous actor.
his first marriage, he had three sons, David, Tom, and Alan. And they lived a block away from us when I was a kid. This was before he married Patty Duke. And he had two sons with her, Sean, who was in Lord of
A
the Rings.
wonderful actor.
And also Mackenzie Adams is also a wonderful actor.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
He's been in a lot of things. So I've known them since before they,
Butch is going to beat my ass now because I just said Addams Family. Okay. Anyway, yeah.
anyway, so the Aston brothers,
Yeah.
Tom,
Uh-huh.
Dave, and Alan
The
were
older ones. Okay.
the older ones. They would dare me to go up to that house and spray the front door with shaving cream.
Oh my God. How old are you when this stuff is going on?
12, 13 years old,
Oh my God.
I was 13 when my mother died. So the few years that followed that, I got in a lot of trouble. I think I
Now,
was,
how was your father handling you getting in trouble with the law?
well, the first time he picked me up,
Hmm.
second time, my stepmother picked me up from the jail. The third time he really got angry about it. The fourth time he saw you're sending you to boarding school. That was like, how that progressed. And in the boarding schools where I really found music again.
Oh,
And as I said, that teacher took me into town, into Berkeley, and had me sing on a record. And all of a sudden, some spark, was lit inside me. And then when I came back to LA at 16 years old, I formed a new band of my own with a couple of guys that I was in school with. One of them was Wolfman Jack's son, Todd. I don't know if you
wow.
remember Wolf,
Of course.
but so I spent a lot of time at his pad. And the one thing about Wolf's house was that drugs were all allowed. It was a free range teenagers.
Mm.
So there was a lot of stuff going on there. So by the years between 13 and say 21 were pretty intense.
Did you finish school?
Yes, I did. I actually did finish school, and I actually
Hmm.
started to go to a community college because I was gonna go into the Air Force and fly jets. I
Wow.
thought maybe my father thought I could use the discipline, and I had a big thing about flying and was way into it. And so I started that path, and then I started to get called for jingles for commercials to do, to be a singer.
Stoned is a really good way to fly jets, I've heard.
No,
Yeah.
not good. Yeah. No, that would have just taken care of that, nipped that right in the bud. But
Jingles. So did you have like a connection did they just heard about you because you were singing out live?
it was a friend of a friend who had sung
Hmm.
on some jingles, was maybe contracting for one, and somebody couldn't make it, so they called me as a sort of a second alternate, and they liked what I did, so I got called back, and then eventually I did years of Toyota commercials, regional Toyota
But
commercials.
this stuff wasn't happening because you were John Williams' son. This was
No,
happening. No.
this was because I
Mhm.
could sing.
This was
Or
because
it
you
was
could
somebody
sing.
that I was in school with who heard me as in a band, or I forget
Hmm.
exactly, where that first gig came from. But the first big one was I sang vocals on something called granola clusters. It was some product, and I don't know if it still exists. But I was going to community college with the idea that I would go into the Air Force. And then I got this check in the mail. And I said, I'm not going to the military. I'm going to do this. So that's where all of that began.
So you're a jingle singer and you want to be a rock star and you have a rock band or more than one. And what happens? You're young.
Yeah, in my early 20s, I got a gig in Vegas in a show called Dream Street.
Okay, wait a minute. You were on Star Search. How you were on Star Search?
Star Search came right after this Dream Street.
Okay, so so Dream Street, Vegas. What is that?
Dream Street was a show at the Dunes Hotel,
Okay.
which used to stand where the Bellagio is
Oh
today.
yeah.
And so the Dunes Hotel had a show in their main showroom called Dream
Mm.
Street. And it was a kind of a Broadway-ish feeling thing. It was six singers and six dancers imitating famous singers and dancers. And that show has become something else that still kind of exists in Vegas somewhere.
Wow.
At one point, it was called Legends or something like that. But
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
originally,
And so who would you do?
so I got the job because I sent it. So that there was a guy who was leaving in the cast, and another friend of a friend suggested me. And so I went up to Vegas and I had a meeting with the director and the producer, and they said, okay, so you need to be able to do this guy. And I just riffed it off top. I had no experience doing any voices for other people. So I just used my imagination to what I thought these people sounded like, and it was good enough. They hired me. So I did the voice of Elvis Presley while another guy backstage, while another guy was in front of a scrim doing the body, like just sort of like a shadow of him. So the audience saw the shadow and I would do the voice backstage. I was Sonny in a Sonny and Cher bit. So it
Wow.
was a quick change show. So I go backstage, put on the wig, put on the fur vest, go out to the center stage and walk down stage and sing I Got You, Babe, with a guy who played Cher, who was incredible.
Too funny.
Yeah, and who else? I did the voice of Fred Astaire singing "The Way You Wear Your Hat," that song. I did Billy Joel song "New York State of Mind." That was like my solo in the show. I was a Pip in the Gladys and the Knights bit, doing that dancing. And what else did I do? I did a couple of other things that are slipping my mind, but that was Dream Street. I did that in Vegas for about a year,
Was that fun?
but less. It was so much fun. It was it was clear this is what I wanted to do. And it scratched all the itches because I got to be on stage. It required a little bit of acting. I had lines as well as,
You danced too.
danced a little bit. I was a pip, so it wasn't very difficult with just the three pips doing those things.
Mhm.
There were also six dancers, and so while I was singing the Fred Astaire part behind a scrim, there was two dancers doing Fred and Ginger out front.
Ah,
So it was a kind of it was a famous people imitating famous people kind of a show.
right.
And very entertaining. And two shows a night, three shows on Saturday.
Wow.
So there was a dinner show while people were, eating their steaks and watching you. And then there was a 10 o'clock show when either people were very loud and drunk, or there would be people down front who'd be looking at you like this because they just lost everything. And then
And
set
obviously your voice had to be in very good shape for you to be
By
singing
the
all
time I
that.
finished, I had definitely gotten strong, gotten very, very strong because it was Vegas is notoriously dry and
Mm.
hot in the summer and cold in the winter.
Hmm.
Um, but it was great. It was a great experience. There was a girl in our show whose name was Monica, forgetting her last name, but she won the first year of Star Search as the female vocalist, and she was
I thought my friend Sam Harris won the first year.
female, I'm talking about.
Ah,
This,
okay.
this woman, Monica. So
Okay.
Monica was scouted from our show to go on Star Search, even though the show was supposed to be about cattle call auditions,
Right.
find raw talent in the in you know
Y-
in a sea of musicians and wannabe singers. But they would get to a certain point in the season where they needed somebody to beat somebody else so that they could have a successful quarterfinals and finals. So they went about scouting a few people here and there. And so they scouted Monica, and Monica left our show, and we've got a replacement for her. And every week we would watch Star Search to see Monica and see how she was doing. And she won again, and she won again. And we thought it was great. And then the same two characters showed up at the show and asked me if I wanted to go on the show. And my first reaction was, no, I don't want to do that. And it was Sam Harris winning every show. And so they
Well,
were trying to scout somebody so that they could get someone to beat him, so that otherwise there would have been no quarterfinals or finals. Nobody else had won. I think he had won like 20 shows in a row out of the 26 or something that they ended up doing. Eventually, I agreed to go on there. And up to that point, Sam kept winning. And when I got to LA, I left the show and I thought, okay, this is going to be my big TV break. And I'm going to be a star now, blah, blah, blah. So I'll leave the show, which was probably a little bit of a mistake. But,
oh, really?
well, it turned out fine.
Yeah,
I went
everything
on,
turned out fine in the
I went on
end.
to other gigs. And also, I don't think the show lasted much more than another year after that anyway, at least in that incarnation. But I went back to LA to do Star Search. And what I was told is that I would be going up against Sam Harris, and they were confident that I could beat him. And I didn't see how, because he was very flamboyant. If you remember Sam, he's
Sam's a
incredible.
good friend of mine, yes, and I've seen his Somewhere Over the Rainbow many
Yes,
times.
and so he was very flamboyant
Yes.
and extremely
Pride.
affected and pride and the
Yes.
whole thing. And hard to take your eyes off of him, and
Mhm.
had a terrific voice. I mean,
Yeah.
really, this
Hmm.
outstanding voice. So I got to the studio and I did my audition, and they said, okay, somebody beat Sam last week, so you're going to be going up against him. And I said, okay, who is it? And he goes, it's a guy named Bo Williams. So it was Bo Williams against Joe Williams.
What?
Seriously. And so I went on against this Bo Williams and won.
What did you sing?
I sang "This Is It" by Kenny Loggins.
How great. Oh God, is there footage of it? I didn't
Oh
even
yeah.
search it
Oh,
out. Oh, I've got to search it out.
it's out there. It's on YouTube. It's embarrassing, but it's there.
No, I've got to find it.
But so I did that and I won, and then I came on the next week and won again. I think I did another Kenny Loggins tune. And then I went on the
Wow.
third week and did a Stevie Wonder song and won again. So
Wow.
next to Sam, I was the only guy that had won multiples. So
Wow.
when we had the quarterfinals, it was Sam Harris, it was me, it was Bo Williams. Even though he had only won once, they brought him back because he beat Sam.
Right.
And there was a fourth guy who was like a country kind of singer who had also won once, but gotten high marks, something along those lines. Or maybe he won twice or something, I can't remember. So they had what was called a recap show, which was the fourth episode that I was on, and we would draw out of a hat to see who was going to sing against who the following week. And so I drew Sam. So it was Sam against me for the or semifinals, and he did Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I did, I think, Ribbon in the Sky by Stevie Wonder, something like that.
Oh.
And he, of course, won, as we know.
Mhm.
And then the other two guys were Bo Williams against this country singer, and Bo Williams won. And so the finals was Bo Williams and Sam Harris, and Sam beat him.
Wow, what a story. I've got to talk to Sam about this. This is
Yeah,
phenomenal. I love this story. It was Sam's birthday yesterday. Happy birthday, Sam.
no kidding. That's great.
What a
How old
great
is Sam?
story. How old?
Yeah, he's got to be close to my age, if not maybe a little bit
He's
older.
younger than I'm 68. I know Sam's in his 50s, I think.
Oh, and he's way younger than me.
I, well,
Well, I don't know about
you're
way.
younger than me, but I'm thinking he's in his
I'll be
50s.
64 this summer.
Well, amazing. You look fabulous. And
Um,
you're a grandpa. We have to we'll get to that. That's crazy altogether.
yeah.
Okay, so you do Star Search now, and you don't have your Vegas gig anymore. So now what are you doing?
So some period of time went by, and I think I got hooked back into some of those Toyota commercials, but I didn't do much. and it was discouraging. But then I forget how he found me, but Jeffrey Osborne asked me
Mhm.
to be a background singer in his live band. So I was with Jeffrey for 2 years as a background singer, touring around the United States. So that was my first outing as a touring artist. And I loved it. It was great. They gave me a very fun step out. He did uh, what was it called? We Are the World. The song We Are the World. And so
Right.
he would sing I think he actually sang on the record, but he sang, maybe so, I can't remember, but he would sing the whole first part of it. And then when it got to the second verse, there was a part where it was Lionel Richie, Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie, uh, Bruce Springsteen, um, Willie Nelson, all in a row, and Kenny Loggins, all in a row, like one line. Each guy had one,
Right.
and so I did all of that,
Wow.
imitating them.
Wow.
Yeah, just and the audience cracked up. They thought it was hysterical, and so
Wow.
that
How
was my
fun.
little bit in that show. And then Toto.
Okay, so now let's talk about that's like huge. So I've heard a couple of things. One, that your dad knew David Page's dad to begin with,
Mhm.
but I also heard that Jason Chef kind of had something to do with maybe your.
Jason had a conversation with Jeff Porcaro because there was talk of asking Jason to join as the lead singer. And he couldn't do it because he had just gotten the gig with Chicago. And so Jason said, "Why don't you try Joe?" Because they all knew me. They all knew who I
And
was.
you and Jason were friends, or you
Yeah,
were? Mhm,
not close friends then.
mhm.
We became closer later on. But he knew who I was. He knew that I could sing and probably do the gig. And so he said to Jeff, "Why don't you try Joe?" So that was what got me into the rehearsal room.
Okay, so now what was that like?
Well,
Okay,
first,
were you a Toto fan when you went in for that
I was
audition?
completely a Toto fan,
Okay.
and all of those songs, and loved them on the radio. Loved all the keyboard work and keyboard solos, which were groundbreaking at the time.
Hmm.
And the vocals were fantastic. The production was great. It was definitely my kind of music. I
Were
love
you a Bobby Kimball fan?
huge, huge Bobby Kimball fan. Absolutely. Um, when I went into audition with them, that was when I learned that there had been another guy before me. There was this guy Fergie Fredrickson who came in
Mhm.
right after Bobby. They made
Right.
one album with him and did one tour with him and fired him for various reasons. I think he was a little hard to work with in the studio and maybe lost his voice live a couple of times. And in those days, those guys had no patience or tolerance for a singer that couldn't do the gig 100% of the time.
And why did Bobby get fired?
Bobby got fired, I think, for legal reasons. I think he got in trouble with the law was one of the major factors. And and then I think it was an easy decision for them to make because he also was a little bit hard to work with in the studio.
Hmm.
He's this loud, natural sort of club uh, kind of a guy. He when you get stuff out of him in the studio, it's phenomenal. But it
Hmm.
takes a little bit more work and a little bit harder to get that stuff out of him. He also would do a show one night, it would be fabulous. The next night, he'd have no voice.
Hmm.
Then, he would get a day off. They would do a show. He'd be fabulous. The next day, he would have no voice.
Hmm.
So I think they got impatient with that. And then
Hmm.
that on top of some of the legal issues that he had, they fired him and hired Fergie. And then Fergie didn't last. And then they've hired me. And what they liked about me was less about my ability to imitate Bobby or do those songs, but they knew me, number one. Page's family knew my dad.
Hmm.
The Picaros knew who I was. My brother was studying with Joe Picaro. And Luke knew who I was because he was in a band very briefly as a teenager with my brother. And
Hmm.
also, I'd seen him play at our school, and I played at his school, and we were acquaintances, didn't really know each other. But I
Hmm.
go back to maybe 14, 15 years old, as long as I've known Luke. So they knew who I was. They also knew I did jingles, so they knew I had studio chops.
Right.
And then they also knew that I did this show in Vegas, which required a vocal stamina. And so they thought, okay, well, he's going to be good live because if you can work in Vegas 2 shows a night, you're going to have some kind of vocal stamina.
Right.
So that's what it was. So the first part of the little audition process was just hanging out, and everybody was into blow at the time, and so we would booze and blow and then play a couple minutes of music and then hang out some more. And because of the Star Search thing and the Jeffrey Osborne thing, I did my very best Bobby imitation, even though
Uh-huh.
it didn't come close to really how great Bobby is. But they had a smile on their face, and they felt that it was powerful enough, and they loved the idea that I had done that Vegas show because they were worried more than anything about my losing my voice live, because that was what they had dealt with the last 2 guys.
Right.
So and Jeff was the only one who wanted me. They had a couple of other guys that were in contention, and the rest of the band wanted one of these other guys. But
Huh.
Jeff was the leader, and Jeff said it's Joe. So that was how I got in. We made the Fahrenheit record, which was the sixth Toto album. And they liked me right away because I was really easy in the studio. I've been doing it since I was 15 years old, and I'm now 26. So
You're a pro.
in the studio, I knew what it was to be behind a mic and do it over again and double yourself, so that it's consistent, and all those little tricks and stuff. I became a much better singer working with David Page, producing me from behind the glass, because he do it again, do it again, do it again. And in those days, there's no Pro Tools, so you have to sing every line of the whole song. And if you're gonna do the chorus, even though it's the same, you got to do it over again down the line. So a session can take anywhere between 2 hours and 6 hours to get a vocal,
Right.
back in those days. Anyway, second album was the seventh one, which was a huge success in Europe. There were 2 songs off of that record that were #1 tunes in Europe, and a lot of people came to the band in Europe from that album, only later to discover the early albums and realize that there were other singers. Obviously,
Wow.
everybody knew Rosanna in Africa,
Right.
but there are a lot of people that I meet in Europe who say your albums are the when I first started listening to the band, and so anyway, very successful over there. On the tour for that album, uh, I lost my voice. I lost my voice.
Okay, wait, before we get to the coming to the end of that, when you first join Toto and you go out on stage for the first time, how does the audience react to you? You're replacing Fergie, so I would imagine there's open arms.
There,
Are there open arms? Are they accepting? Is
I
there
didn't
cynicism? What's going on?
I didn't notice any kind of negativity from the audience, but then again, I was in a kind of a haze throughout the whole thing.
I
Uh,
mean, is it it's your lifetime dream come true? Is it the thrilling moment that you
yes,
were?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was more thrilling than anything I had done. I also was well aware of the music that came before me in the band, and the shoes that I was filling. But I was so dazed that I'd gotten this gig and that I was on stage with these guys playing, that I didn't sense any negativity from the audience. What I did feel was that it was difficult. It was a difficult show to do.
Mm.
They wouldn't allow any changing of keys back then for these songs, and some of these Bobby songs were well out of my range. So I was
Huh.
pushing myself a lot harder than I should have range wise. My speaking voice is in here. Bobby talks like this when he talks. His speaking voice is much, much higher, and therefore he can, sing higher.
Mhm.
My top note is about a C, or maybe in the old days I could hit sorry about that. Maybe in the old days I could hit a D or something like that. But for the most part, I'm hitting a C. Bobby hits E's and F's above that C, above the C above middle C. So incredible, incredible voice. But I was very consistent on stage.
Mhm.
So when my voice was behaving and doing what I needed it to do, I was very, very consistent on stage, and I think that was appreciated by the band and also the fans.
Mhm.
Live, they're much more forgiving anyway, you know. I think the records in the United States were not quite so big. I think the diehard fans of Toto were like, wait a minute, where's the guy? You know what I mean? In Europe, it
I
was a
think they got over that.
they did, there's still a group of diehard fans that don't like change. We still go out and we still tour, and Luke is the only guy standing there that's
Mhm.
from the he's been to every rehearsal and every show that's ever been done by the
Right.
band. And I'm welcomed at this point because I had some time with the band back in the old days,
Mhm.
and have now been doing it for almost 15 years plus. Um, but the fans still get upset when we change other members. We had a different drummer for a few years.
Mhm.
Simon was with us for a while, and then he
Mhm.
left. The diehard fans get upset by that, only to be won over by whatever the
Right.
new version is.
Right.
So, but it was a total dream come true. It was a very hard gig live, very difficult gig, and I was constantly worried about my voice, and I didn't really get any training to do it. So on that second tour, we started the tour and I had the flu, and also did some nonsense with drugs, on that tour. Lost my voice. And once that happened, we actually had to finish the whole tour, but I was fired that day. So we did a handful of shows. I lost my voice, had to kind of limp through the rest of the tour for about 6 weeks. But the decision was made. So it was bad vibes. It was just really,
Oh,
really bad vibes. And I left, and that was like, 88, 89.
that had to be heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking.
Oh,
It was that was the beginning of a very difficult time,
oh, I bet.
and that was when I first, came to Alcoholics Anonymous was in 1990. And put together 11 years and met my wife and had my kids and
Oh,
started,
wow.
started a new career composing for TV and short films and low budge films and all that stuff. That was when all that started. Hooked up with Snuffy.
How
You know,
did you meet Snuffy?
I think our agent or that we had in common suggested that
Mike
it,
Orphan?
it, it was I think it was Gorfain or
Hmm.
Cheryl Tiano maybe.
Hmm.
And Snuffy at that time, his company, he had like 10 shows going at the same
Yeah, it was
time.
crazy.
So he had Bennett Salve, working on
Hmm.
a couple and one with him, and Bennett would do one on his own. And then he had like, four sitcoms, and then Snuffy was doing two on his own. And he kept getting offers to do more and more and more. And so he got offered to do Felicity.
Right.
And Cheryl or somebody suggested me. And this was around 1998, I think. And oddly enough, the Toto guys called me. This is now, 8, 10 years later. Called me and said, "Look, we're putting out an album. It's the 20th anniversary album, but it contains songs that were unfinished and shelved. So we're going to finish them in the studio. 3 of them are you. 3 of them are Bobby. And then we've got a couple instrumentals, and that's going to be the album. So we're going to need you to come in the studio to finish them." So I did, and it was great because I felt like I got to be back in the band for a minute, and I got to work with Bobby,
How
who
was
who
that?
was also asked to be. Well, we became instant friends, and he was amazing. I mean, your hair would blow back. He was so loud. Um, Incredible talent.
I shot him at a Nam Jam, and yeah, he's He's incredible.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
So they said we were going to do a little tour to promote this 20th anniversary album. We want both of you to come. So we did a tour, and it was both of us. So Bobby sang Hold the Line, Rosanna, Africa, and I sang Pamela, Stop Loving You.
Mhm.
It was in Europe, so Stop Loving You and Pamela were both big tunes. And
Right.
it was a fantastic concert. It was great. Up to that point in the 90s, the band had no lead singer. Luke became the front man. Luke became the front man because,
Oh,
the band has always had several lead singers. Dave
right.
sang the verses for Africa, Bobby sings the chorus. Luke sings the verses for Rosanna, Bobby sings the chorus. So Luke became the front man, and they hired three background singers to come out one at a time and do the high Bobby parts or the high Fergie parts or the high Joe parts, so on. So that went on from about 91 all the way to 98. And then Bobby and I came back and did that tour. And they rehired Bobby, and I continued my TV path. And while we were in Copenhagen doing that tour, I got a call in my hotel room, or I called him from Snuffy. And we talked for like 2.5 hours. And we were just getting to know each other. And so it ended with, well, if you can make some kind of a reel or something. He said, I'm going to send you something of some music from a show that we do called Early Edition.
Mhm.
And he said, and it's kind of one of the aspects of this is maybe what they're looking for Felicity. So maybe you can make a reel and I could present it to the producers, and I would love to have you sort of handle the show, under his supervision, kind of.
Mhm.
So I made a reel, and the producers of Felicity didn't want me. They wanted Snuffy. Since they were hiring Snuffy, they wanted Snuffy, period. So, but the producers for Early Edition liked what I was doing, and so Snuffy was able to put me on Early Edition to do every other episode with Bennett. So Snuffy started it, and then the last couple of years of the series was Bennett and I doing, one episode him, one episode me. And it just grew from there. And then Roswell came out of that. And Snuffy was so busy on West Wing at the time that I kind of did the lion's share of that. But he was instrumental in getting the themes and the sound of it and all of that together. But I sort of handled that work and did our Early Edition at the same time. I was always doing two shows at the same time with Snuffy because he
That's
had
fantastic.
tons of work, tons of stuff going through his studio. And then I moved into doing like some orchestrating for him on some of his other shows, West Wing a couple of times, and a few other things, and also sitting in the studio with the engineer Avi Kipper, making sure that all of the MIDI and everything on the computer ran properly so that it could be mixed in a timely way.
And is your father just loving that you're doing this?
He's loving it, but he used to I called him constantly. How do I do this? What they need like a jazz piece that sounds like Bewitched. How do I do that? What is that? And so he would coach me through stuff.
Hmm.
I think he was impressed by it.
Hmm.
A great story with my dad is he came over to Thanksgiving. At this point, my wife and I had a nice house. We had the two kids. I had built a wonderful studio in my garage, out of my garage, and was doing a couple of shows simultaneously, working with Snuffy, and things were going really well. And I had acquired walls of samplers in order to get the orchestra orchestra samples, and a whole other wall of synths and all kinds of stuff, all connected to a computer, which was then all connected to a console over here for mixing, and it was an elaborate looking room. And my dad, who's an old school composer, I mean, candle and quill is all he really. He comes over to the house. And I go, let me show you the studio. And I show him in the studio, and he's looking around at all the gear, and he's going, wow, this is incredible. He goes, and this is the orchestra. I said, yeah, these three are woodwinds, and these three over here are the string. That's incredible. And he goes, and it's all connected there. And I said, yeah, it comes in here. I've got a keyboard here. I can access any one of these sounds and write it into the sequence. this sequencing software. That's amazing. He said, and it all goes over here and you mix it too. I go, yeah, it all goes over there and mix it and mix down to this machine over there. And he rubbed his beard like this and he goes, now, why do you need all this? Being the old school guy that he is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Huh.
but listen, he was tremendously proud of me being able, I think more than anything, he was proud of the fact that I had lost a dream gig and started a new career.
What I didn't even ask you, what did he think when you got Toto? And did he ever see you? Has he seen you?
The one time that he hasn't seen me with Toto, he has not seen me with Toto. He's seen video.
Mm-hmm.
He knows what it looks like. He knows what the songs sound like, but he's never been there in the room. He did come and see me in Vegas when I was doing that Dream Street show.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows, he knows what
He's seen you do your thing.
he's seen me do my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, he was happy for the Toto gig. I think more than anything, he knew some of these kids' parents. And so he knew what kind of trouble that we could all get into. And I think that worried him.
Yeah.
I remember, I forget, I think it was before Toto. I cut my hair all off and I decided I wanted to bleach it like white blonde, platinum blonde. And I went into this place and they said, okay, well, to do that, we have to bleach all the color out of your hair. And I said, fine. So they did that and they put the dye in, but it didn't work right. And it ended up green.
Oh my God.
And so when I finally joined Toto, my hair was sort of back to normal, whatever. His response to me when I said, I'm joining the rock band Toto, and he says, oh, that's wonderful. Please don't put any green in your hair. That was his response. So, yeah. So anyway, that was that. And then I did a couple of different things for Toto over the years. Bobby was back from 99 to 08. And in 05, they did an album called Falling in Between.
Mm-hmm.
Luke called me and said, we have this one song that's actually perfect for you singing the choruses. Will you come in and do it? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And and then I did like a handful of concerts as a guest singer, sort of this in the same way that we did that 98 thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2010, Luke called and said, look, but Dave's coming back, Steve Porcaro's coming back. It'll be me, Simon. We want you to be the singer. We're going to go out and do some concerts to make some money for Mike, who was dying of ALS. So that was how it started.
Mm.
And before I started, I went and found a teacher. Dave helped me find a great vocal teacher. And I worked with him a lot for a
Wow.
couple of years and sort of had to relearn how to do the gig because it's not an easy gig. And
Wow.
now everybody's a little bit older. I was turning 50, the guys were in their 50s. And they agreed to change the keys on a couple of things, which nobody really notices unless you're a super duper diehard fan, but
Mm-hmm.
it sounds great.
Good for you for doing that. Good for you for doing that.
Yeah. I told my dad one time that the guys didn't want to change keys, and he said, let me tell you a little story. He said, I did some concerts for Sinatra, and he was conducting the orchestra for the Sinatra thing. And they did the rehearsal, and then they broke for dinner, and they came back after dinner, and Sinatra said to my dad, Johnny, we're doing this tune, this tune, and this tune a whole step lower tonight. And he said, we can't do that. All the music is prepared for how we rehearsed it. It would be next to impossible to get it all recopied for the musicians, a whole step lower. And he said, Johnny, you don't understand. We're doing it a whole step. And so they had to scramble to get it
Wow.
done. But
It's Frank. You got to do it.
he told me that story. He said, the singer is the one that's supposed to tell you what key he wants to do it in.
Wow.
And if musicians are any good, they should be able to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was able to change some keys.
So, okay, so you rejoined the band and it's been like 15 years and you and Luke are like joined at the hip and brothers in arms and all things, it seems, on each other's solo albums and all of that. And life is pretty good. So, but you've had a shift in life in that you've in this time gotten sober, yeah?
Yeah, once again. So I mean,
Once
I
again.
started in 1990 and I had 11 years off of everything. And then I had a back injury
Oh,
and I got hooked on Soma.
what's Soma?
Soma is a muscle relaxer, not a benzodiazepine though. It's a separate thing, maybe a little bit more towards the barbiturate area, but
Hmm.
it's a very commonly prescribed muscle relaxer slash pain inhibitor is what it says about it. The
Okay.
generic name is carsaprodiol or carsaprodol, something like that. You learn these things when you go to rehab, you know. So I got strung out on that and that it's become a Schedule One, and it wasn't back then.
Uh-huh.
So I had a horrible time with that. And then I got sober again and stayed sober for a couple of years. And then I went back out on it and then got sober again, stayed a couple of years, then went back out again, and
Mm.
then went back into the program, stayed sober for about 4 years. And then and from 1990 up to 2014, I hadn't had a drink.
Oh,
Okay, so it's 24 years without a drink. And so in 2014, I thought maybe alcohol is not my problem,
there you go.
you know. Maybe it's just pills. Maybe I'm a
Mm,
drug addict, not an
mm.
alcoholic. And so I started teetotaling with beer here and there, wine here and there, and it went along fine that way. I was able to tour. I didn't overdo it, and became very convinced that I could completely handle this. Well, within 3 years, it started to get bad. I started to just
Mm.
graduate from beer to wine, just chapter three completely, you know, just trying different things, and eventually got all the way back up to tequila and was drinking that like a fish. And I figured that since I was drinking tequila, that I'll smoke weed, but I'll never go back to pills.
Where you drew the line.
That was where I drew the line.
Mm.
And then, you know, it all came to a head during COVID. You know what I mean? Things started to get really, really out of hand. Luke and I spent a ton of time together. And
When COVID hit, what were you in the middle, like where was Toto at? What were you guys up to when COVID hit?
we had finished our 2019 tour, which was really successful,
Mm-hmm.
and Steve Porcaro decided he didn't want to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Dave kind of stopped doing it in 2018 for health reasons. So we had a replacement for him. Steve Porcaro didn't want to do it anymore after 2019. We had planned to take 2020 off anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew it was going to be off, and that was when I figured I'll do a solo album. I think Luke was going to do a solo album. I'll do a solo album, and we'll pick it back up in 2021.
Right.
So then COVID hits, and Luke is of the mind that, well, maybe we should just call it. Maybe it's just time, you know what I mean, to call it. So I felt that it was important that I spend as much time with him as I could to keep him interested in not calling it, and you know, maybe putting together another version and doing it when COVID subsides. We didn't realize it would be 2 years without touring. So
Right.
all of 21 and all of 20 and all of 21, we didn't tour. But we did make a DVD, a live DVD that I performed on acid. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, craziness. So
Wow.
anyway, last year it just came to a head for me. You know, and having said all that, during the tours, 22 and 23, I was okay. I was able to sort of get through and not, it was too important for me for the show to come off well. But when I was,
How did your voice hold up if you were doing all of these
well, I
substances?
didn't drink that much. I didn't drink to the point of blacking out or not be, you know, missing bus calls and all of that. And you know, I did drank, got plenty of sleep, drank plenty of water, and was able to do the gig just fine. It was when I got home and we would have a month or two off from the tour
Mm,
that I would
mm,
go completely off the rails again.
mm-hmm.
Until last year, faced with my daughter who's looking at me like, you're just gonna die, and I'm not gonna watch this. That was enough. So
That was your bottom.
that was another one,
Mm-hmm.
but pretty bad,
Mm-hmm.
pretty bad. Gift of desperation.
Do you think sobriety's sticking this time?
I feel like it is. I mean, first of all, at my age, I don't think that I could go back and physically be able to handle the work. And, I'm not sure how, I wouldn't be able to do it for very long. I'll put it to you that way. And the work, the gigs are too important to me.
Mhm.
So I don't want to ruin that. Also, it's so much easier to get to meetings now that Zoom is a thing.
It is.
So I
It
can stay
is.
connected. I can stay connected on the road. And the other great thing is that Warren is there, and Warren has, been clean sober for a long time. Luke doesn't drink and do anything anymore. There are two guys in the band who are literally teetotalers. They'll maybe have a drink once a week. So we have a very clean bus right now.
Mhm.
And I sleep better than I've slept in years.
That's
And
great.
that helps with the shows. And so it's just not worth it. You know what I mean? It's not worth it. And I stay connected to AA just because that's what's worked for me in the past.
It's
So
fabulous.
as much as I can stick to it is as much as it will work for me.
I love it. Okay, so tell me where people, I know you're going over to Europe
Hmm.
like soon, in a few weeks, couple
Hmm.
weeks. And then I know there's one day in Rancho Mirage in August that I'm going to make Snuffy get tickets to tonight. And what's after that?
The Rancho Mirage gig is a means after a month or so off of just getting everybody back in the room and doing the show so that we don't go to the Hollywood Bowl cold.
When's the Hollywood Bowl?
September 1st at the
Oh
Hollywood,
no, that's where we're going to go.
which is my
Oh hell.
which is my 64th birthday.
Oh yay. Oh, we're definitely doing that. Oh hell
So,
yeah.
so we do that, and then we've got some time off, and then in the late fall, early winter, we go to South America,
Fabulous.
and that will close out 2024. So we did 3 months with Journey, the Europe run, and South America.
It sounds wonderful. Well, Joseph, you look, you sound, you sober as a judge. I mean, grounded, wonderful, fabulous. I've so enjoyed this. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've
My
so
pleasure.
enjoyed getting to know you. I can't wait. I interviewed Luke. I interviewed Warren. I can't wait to come out and see you guys. I'm so excited. Have a wonderful run out there in Europe, and please send my love to your sister. I adore her,
I absolutely will.
and thank you so much again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.